During this event, we have automatic closed captioning available. Please go to the bottom of the Zoom meeting, click Live Transcript, and then Show Subtitles to turn them on. Before we begin, we'd like to take a quick moment to let you know how you can join an opinion research panel made specifically for British Columbians living with disabilities.
For 25 years, the Disability Foundation has been fostering meaningful experiences for Canadians with disabilities through outdoor recreation, social connectedness, innovative adaptive devices, and more. Today we are asking, how has the pandemic affected you? Help strengthen decision makers' understanding of your needs and experiences by joining an online opinion research panel consisting solely of people with disabilities and their caregivers. Make a difference in your community today. The Disability Foundation. Reimagine what is possible.
Did you know? Young adults with disabilities have a harder time getting hired. Break down barriers by sharing your story. Take our survey.
All right. So welcome everyone to our perspective series on navigating athletics with a disability. So we started these perspective series I guess about 6 months ago, and basically we bring in people who are living with disabilities or are involved with organizations that cater towards people living with disabilities. And we have all different sorts of topics, and they always are just really nice, organic, free-flowing sort of conversations. So I encourage you to jump in at any time, sort of comment on what other panelists are commenting on. Let's just have a conversation. I would love to sort of hear everybody's different perspectives on sort of the questions at hand. We may get joined by some guests during the conversation, and they also have the ability to unmute themselves or raise a hand and ask a question in the chat box. So we will try and get everyone's questions answered. Before we begin, I just want to let everyone know again that this is being live streamed. So yes, you can feel free to turn your camera on or off. I think we're all good with seeing each other, which is awesome. And yeah, you are, there's just the three of us here today because Richard hasn't joined, but we'll see if he comes along later. But I'm going to introduce the panelists that we do have. So thank you so much for being here. We'll start with Terry Thorson. Terry was a support technician for a computer software company and a professional dancer before a 1996 motor vehicle crash in Australia left her a tetraplegic. In 2002, she discovered wheelchair racing. Within the span of 2 years, she returned to Australia to focus on full-time training and made the Canadian national team. Her dedication was rewarded by being able to compete at the 2004 Athens Paralympics in the 400-meter track event, where she made the finals. Currently, Terry lives in North Vancouver with her partner and son. She is a board member of BC Wheelchair Sports, president of the BC Wheelchair Rugby Association, and WC Race Series Society. She continued in sport as a player on the BC Provincial Wheelchair Rugby team and is now a coach of wheelchair rugby. So welcome, Terry. You have anything you want to add to that? Terry is also very active with our organization, which is awesome. Guests on lots of things.
No, all good, Emily. Thanks.
Okay, great. So I'll just get past Richard here and we will go to Julie Black. So Julie is originally from Duncan, BC, and now lives in Nanaimo. Julie has been an athlete with Special Olympics for 11 years. Wow. Her favorite memory is competing in softball at the 2017 Special Olympics BC Provincial Summer Games in Kamloops, where she was able to run the bases without a walker. Julie also spends a lot of her time working at Tim Hortons and hanging out with her husband and her friends. Welcome, Julie. Do you want to add anything? Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
And then we have Chelsea Tamblini. Am I saying that right? Tambellini?
Tambellini, yeah, like Bellini, but with a tam on it.
Love it.
Yeah.
Was born in Vancouver and raised in Port Coquitlam. She was an elite synchronized swimmer for over 10 years and then coached for 10 years. So Chelsea has a degree in recreation management and has been a staff member with Special Olympics, you said, coming up on 5 years now in October, I think you said. She loves spending most of her time outside, where she now lives in Maple Ridge, walking or running with her dog, Denver. Thanks,
Hopefully Denver
Chelsea.
doesn't make an appearance today, but
Oh, I wouldn't mind. A very cute name for a pup.
thanks.
And we just have Richard popping in right now as well. So welcome, Richard. Thanks for being here. Just in the nick of time. Richard, I was just introducing our other panelists, so I would love to introduce you as well. How you doing?
Not bad.
Thanks
Sorry
for
I'm
being
late.
here. You're fine. You're here.
Yeah.
So I was just going to give a little intro on you then, Richard, to everybody else. Richard Bear Peter began playing wheelchair basketball at age 15 after a team came to his high school and introduced him to wheelchair sports. He's been using a wheelchair since being injured in a bus accident at 4 years old. Peter became a staple of Team Canada since first making the senior men's national team in 1994. His athletic repertoire includes back-to-back Paralympic gold medals, a Paralympic silver medal, third Paralympic gold medal in 2012, and a world championship title in 2006. Among those, he's also received the Tom Longboat National Award for Aboriginal Male Athlete of the Year, Wheelchair Basketball Canada's Male Athlete of the Year in 2010, and he was inducted into the BC Sports Hall of Fame. In 2012, he received a National Aboriginal Achievement Award for his outstanding athletic accomplishments. Richard retired from the national team following the 2012 season and is currently on the national para badminton team. So obviously, Richard enjoys a wide variety of sports. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Emily, the program coordinator from ConnecTra. I know we've connected before. Then we have Terry Thorson and Chelsea Tambellini from Special Olympics, and Julie Black, who's also a Special Olympics athlete. So this is just going to be a free-flowing conversation. Would just love to hear your different perspectives on navigating the athletic world with a disability. I'd love to start with a question for Terry. Terry, can you tell us about sort of the 6-year period, it seems, if my math is correct, between your accident and discovering wheelchair racing? Like, how did you discover it? And sort of what hesitations, if any, did you have before re-entering the world of athletics?
Well, good question. Thanks, Chelsea. I would say it probably took me that amount of time, to become comfortable enough with my disability to be able to try something. But a really big part was my perception of myself. So I never actually considered myself an athlete. And it was funny, even after going to the Paralympics, I still would never have called myself an athlete. And it was this weird mentality that I had about what an athlete did or looked like or whatever. And I just didn't feel like I, fit into that mold, I guess. Even though, when I look back now, obviously I was a dancer. So, I mean, that's very athletic, right? But it was something that I did for fun. And so I had this perspective of what an athlete is. And I obviously had to make a lot of sacrifices in order to, get to the level that I did with athletics. But I loved it. It was a passion of mine. So I didn't really feel like I fit into that traditional mold. So it took me a little while, and then it was thankfully the influence from a lot of very engaged volunteers that introduced me to just trying something different. And so I didn't try athletics at first. I tried kayaking and skiing and a whole bunch of other things. And because I was like, oh, actually, this isn't too bad, that led me to try athletics as well.
Awesome. Did you find out about a lot of those opportunities through SEIBC?
Mostly. So at the time I had a job that I was working at GF Strong with a nonprofit organization. So I was introduced to a lot of that through them. I know at the time SEIBC, well, back then it was called BCPA or the BC Paraplegic Association, did try to, when I was first injured, as well as the rec therapist there, get me involved in different things. But like I said, I was like, no, I'm not an athlete. I never was an athlete. I'm not going to try anything. So Yeah, I left it alone.
And then came around. Yeah.
Came around. Exactly.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I would think that our perspective of ourselves would have your own self-image would have a lot of to do with, being able to put yourself out there and try something new. So, Julie, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with Special Olympics and how you got involved and what sports you like to play?
I started Special 11 years ago. So in high school, I wasn't allowed to play because they thought, no, you're going to get hurt. You're too small. And so I thought, fine, I won't play then, I guess. So I didn't really get into sports until my friend's mom was talking to her about Special Ed one day. And then I joined that fall. And I started with floor hockey and bowling. And being short, of course, I was like, these guys are big. I don't know about this. So, of course, I managed to actually get the ball in between their legs and run past them. And the coach looked, he's like, oh, this one's good. Okay. Yeah, nice. I've been with them ever since. And then I started playing soccer and softball. That's when.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And what has sort of those experience done for your self-image and your sort of self-confidence?
It's definitely shown that I can do a lot more than I expected.
That's great. Nice. Yeah, which is nice. Totally. That's awesome.
And I proved everybody wrong, especially the kids in my school, because they didn't think that I'd be able to, play sports. And now I can go back to them and the teacher would be like, by the way, I've actually been to provincial twice for sports. And they'll go, wait, what? It's pretty fun watching the reaction.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Chelsea, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Special Olympics and how you sort of support people on their journey of getting involved?
Totally. Thanks, Julie. That was a great explanation of kind of one example of an athlete getting involved in Special Olympics. I got involved personally. I'm obviously a huge sports advocate with my background in synchronized swimming. I have a sister who's an Olympic gymnast, so she attended the Olympics twice. So kind of the Olympic word in our family was really important. And then I came across Special Olympics looking for a job opportunity. And I thought that it was an amazing organization. I didn't know a ton about it, admittedly, when I got involved, as I think a lot of people also don't know a lot about it unless they talk to people like Julie or myself and kind of learn about that it's for individuals with intellectual disabilities. There's kind of that misconception that we have that association with the Paralympics, which we don't. We all, of course, respect each other in our own ways, but we don't compete at the same time as them. Our athletes primarily have intellectual disabilities, and then some have physical disabilities. So so I learned all about that when I first started here. And then since then, I've had the honor of working with athletes like Julie that have overcome some amazing challenges with their intellectual disabilities. And like you said, Emily, gained so much confidence and kind of became familiar with themselves as athletes, which is something that they've never really been able to do prior to getting involved, and do a million sports like Julie does and are successful in so many different sports, which is really cool too. So a great organization, but that's kind of the way that I got involved and have been learning about it ever since.
That's very cool. So will people approach the organization saying, I'd like to get involved, but I'm not sure how, and then you kind of coach them through, or do they have specific goals in mind?
No, absolutely. Or they aren't really familiar with how they can get involved, or they think that it's a high level performance organization, which isn't the case. You can have never done a sport before in your life and you can join anticipating to participate recreationally, or you can join anticipating to compete on the world stage. So we have athletes from all different abilities and goals that like to get involved. But yes, we get a lot of young athletes and parents who have just been diagnosed with an intellectual disability and they don't know where to start, and they know that they like soccer and they've never fit into their usual soccer program. So they come to us wanting to be around people like themselves. So that's a great way for them to start. And we also have adults who are, you know, in their 40s or 50s that have never been involved in a group organization because they've only ever maybe gone to school and worked and then thought, no, I do want to get involved in my community and in sport, and have discovered Special Olympics. So we have lots that get involved at a later age as well. So yeah, kind of all over the place. And that's kind of part of my job, is to help get them involved and answer those questions and make them feel confident in their programs once they eventually get in there, and then they stick around, like Julie, who's a lifer, I think. So hopefully that's what everyone does once they get into it.
Awesome. Good to know. Yeah, I think there are a lot of sort of preconceived misconceptions about Special Olympics, and that's awesome to know that you don't have to be at a certain level to just start and get involved. Okay, very cool. Richard, would love to hear about your story. So were you interested in sports before seeing the wheelchair basketball team at the age of 15, or did you think it wasn't an option for you? Can you sort of tell us about that journey and what it was like sort of seeing the world of wheelchair basketball?
I guess my story is a little bit different in that I got injured as a young child and then went back to my home community on Vancouver Island of Duncan, BC. So I actually didn't know much about parasports or any other activities. And then, as you mentioned earlier, then a basketball team came to my school and introduced me. But before that, I was very fortunate that, you know, I think my parents mainly and my community really included me in all activities from elementary, and you know, any programs that my family was doing included me as much as possible. And so mainly I was saying my mom just sort of kicked me out the door and said, go play, go have fun. And so that's what I've always done. I've always played, you know, whether it be ball hockey with my neighbors and my friends on the street, and then playing, you know, a bit of softball. And we always adapted sports, because this is back in the late 70s and early 80s. So we adapted, you know, a lot of sports back then. You know, let's say for football, I'd go play football and I'd be the quarterback, because that'd be easier for me to play in a wheelchair with everybody else running and jumping. And for ball hockey, I'd be the goalie and everybody else would still be running around. And so I was always adapted, and we included me in any sport that, you know, I could do. And so it was pretty neat to do. And then once I get involved in the parasports, then that just sort of opened up a lot of doors for me. And yeah, sort of brought me down this path.
Yeah, that sounds like you had a super supportive community around you, and that's obviously going to take you, you know, really far in your perception of yourself and your ability to do things as well, because it didn't sound like you were left out of much.
But even I'll say I was the same as Terry too, that once, like even when the demo team came to my school, I was like, no, I don't want to join that program. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. But once I got out and got involved, and then, yeah, I tried every sport that I could. You know, I tried athletics, I tried racquetball, tennis.
Yeah.
And then, of course, team sports was the biggest that I really enjoyed. And so that's where I gravitated towards basketball. And then, yeah, the rest is history.
Interesting. So was there a sort of like a para sports near you, near your community in Duncan, or did you have to travel for that?
So actually similar again to Terry, with SCIBC, and back then it was BC Paraplegic Association. I did have one peer that came to visit me once in a while in Duncan, but he was, you know, I was a young kid, and then had this older gentleman come up and try to introduce me to stuff. But so I really wasn't that interested back then. But once I got involved, then so they were based out of Victoria. So they were about an hour south of Duncan. And so I got a bit of communication with the SCI community. But back then, you know, social media wasn't as big, so I didn't really know, find out about any programs. And then once I slowly found out more about wheelchair sports and wheelchair basketball, then I tried as much as possible.
Awesome. Yeah. And Terry, can I just ask, when you were introduced to wheelchair racing and you used to be a dancer, did you like consider at all dancing again, or going back to any of the sort of like arts-based athletics as well?
So yes, I, just to clarify, was a go-go dancer at a nightclub. So I wasn't like, you know, doing theater, fancy dancing. I was a stage dancer, right? So I still went to the clubs, but the dancing for me hasn't been the same experience. And I dance in a wheelchair, but there's no way that they would have ever paid me to be a dancer again on that stage. And B, yeah, I didn't have the same passion for it, only using 2 limbs rather than 4. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Good clarification. Yeah. That's a big transition.
Yeah, it was. I miss it. I haven't been able to find anything that relieves my stress as much as dancing did, actually. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing. Julie, how did you find when you first joined Special Olympics relating to your teammates and sort of making friends?
I think it really clicked when I joined the hockey team because I was a big hockey fan already as it was. So of course, when I started with them, I was like, oh, I just like them. This is kind of nice. I can actually be myself instead of somebody else. Because in school, I had that, like, I tried to be like the other kids, but I was like, I wasn't able to. I thought myself like clear one of the bunch.
Yeah.
So when I started with Special O, it was like, oh, there's people that I can relate to. This is kind of interesting. Thank goodness for that.
That's awesome. So sort of the difference between trying to fit in and kind of belonging somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any advice for somebody coming to the Special Olympics as someone that maybe hasn't tried a lot of sports? Like any advice for them to sort of find their niche?
Be yourself. That's what I gotta say. Be yourself and, just try a sport that you haven't tried before that you really want to try. You may really like it in the end. And if you don't, there's other sports.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Chelsea, do people get put on teams based on ages at all or abilities, or how does the process kind of work?
Yeah, so not necessarily based on teams or put on teams based on ages and abilities. In the community, you can be in a program with a 12-year-old and a 65-year-old on the same team a lot of the times, which is really cool. I really like that about this organization, is that they're inclusive of all ages and abilities. It's more so once you get to competition that they like to look at that, just so that there is that fair competition involved. It's called divisioning is the process that we go through with that. So that'll separate male and female. That'll separate a lot, sometimes ages, sometimes, levels, if they're on an A, B, C, or D, like basketball team or something like that. But yes, very inclusive is one of the amazing things about this organization, is how inclusive they are. And as Julie was speaking to, just being yourself, because there's always going to be somebody in Special Olympics who appreciates you just the way that you are. And where I like to think that the organization is super welcoming of volunteers, of athletes that are involved. And it's a place where people can truly just be who they want to be, and they'll be accepted by everyone around them. So great advice, Julie, for any newcomers, for sure.
Yeah, and for anyone that might be watching this after the fact or on Facebook or YouTube that is thinking about sort of approaching the Special Olympics and getting involved with this, can you just sort of walk us through the process of how it might go from somebody making a phone call or showing up at the office?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a provincial office within Special Olympics BC, but it's actually an international organization. So there's Special Olympics International, there's Special Olympics Canada, and then we're divided into chapters within Special Olympics BC. So if you're living in BC and you want to get involved, the provincial office has about 20 staff members that are designated to different areas, whether it's the program coordination, competition, fundraising, communications. So lots of people you can reach out to depending on what you're kind of looking for. for. And then we're within BC broken down into 55 different communities around the province. So each of those communities have a local committee. So it's a group of volunteers that ensure the functioning of that community and the programs offered within that community run smoothly. And then depending on where you live is where you would register. So Julie lives in Nanaimo and she was in Duncan, but she's now an Nanaimo athlete based on where she's living. So if anyone is looking to get registered, they'd be in touch with someone like myself. I cover the Lower Mainland. So I cover about 15 different locals from Whistler to Chilliwack. So if you wanted to get involved in any of those communities, you'd reach out to someone like me, and then I'd be in touch with that local committee to get them officially to register you into their programs. But then throughout the province, we have people like myself, community development coordinators in different regions of the province. So in the north, in the Kootenays, on the island, in the Okanagan. So that's how you do it.
All right. You're everywhere. Love it. That's fantastic. And Richard, are you still quite involved with para sports?
Yeah, sure, why not? So actually that's how I was working with SCIBC, and then I got approached by Badminton Canada, and they were gonna, as you mentioned earlier, try to find new athletes to play para badminton. And so that's how I got involved and said, sure, I'll find a bunch of athletes to come out and try. And I said, I might as well give it a try also. And so that's where I got back involved into para sports with badminton. But sort of with, same as both Julie and Terry, that, I think I'm a sport for life kind of guy too. And so I've always participated in, like, let's say, even with hand cycling or table tennis, tennis with Wilshire Sports and para badminton. So I'm always, willing to try one sport for a time, and then also to help try to get more athletes to come out and be involved too. So I always say I'm a good middleman. If somebody has a question, I'll try to point them in the right direction.
Awesome. Yeah. So how do you go about finding athletes? That are interested? Like what if somebody is in high school right now and they don't know about this world and they don't sort of have the, the pleasure of having a basketball team in wheelchair basketball come in and sort of show them that world? What advice would you give to them to sort of reach out?
We just find where their community is, and then sort of, again, what sport they're interested in, and then we'll try to connect them. Let's say if, all different regions, we have some sport group in different areas, whether it's on the island, up north, in the interior, or the Lower Mainland. Of course, there's a lot of services provided close to Vancouver and the greater Vancouver area, but let's say if somebody's in Prince George, we'll go, all right, yeah, there's a basketball, maybe some rugby and sledge hockey, and or if there's somebody on the island, what sport are you interested in? So we'll try to make those connections as to whatever they're interested in. Then we'll try to make those connections. And those are some of the larger sports, but even some of the smaller sports, like whether it be table tennis or badminton, sit skiing, which are smaller individual sports, then we'll try to make those connections also.
Awesome. And is it similar to what Chelsea was saying about Special Olympics, where you can be at any level?
Yeah, I mean, especially with disability, it does, there's no set time as to when you're going to get injured or if you're born with your disability. So yeah, we have many people with different ages, different levels, and hopefully we can find, you in the right program that sort of is good for your development. And, the big thing I always say too, very similar to Julie and, well, everybody that's on the panel is to make sure you get out there and try the sport, but make sure you're having fun. Because if you're not having fun, then you're not going to continue on. And so that's one of the big things that we always try to promote, is to make sure that you have fun and hopefully you stick around and enjoy the sport.
So you've been able to maintain your level of fun as you've moved up to be in quite competitive leagues?
Yes and no. I mean, I always laugh because I'd say, yes, I'm on the national badminton team, but I just do it because I enjoy sports. I'm not on it to play the highest level and be a high performance athlete. I'm like, I just happen to be good enough to be on the national team, I guess. Yes, I know I should train more, but to me, I do it as a nice recreational sport. But yeah.
That sounds like a good situation.
Yeah.
Terry, tell us a little bit about where you are in your sort of athletic journey now and what's coming up next. I know you're working on some stuff.
Yeah, I retired a couple of years ago, mostly because I have an injury that is not fixable. Um, so I'm in the process of my own life of trying to find activities that do not cause pain or to progress the injury further. So it's been a little bit of a struggle, but so that's kind of why I just ended up getting into coaching rugby, because I still really loved the sport. I felt like I got cut off. Not that I was going to go anywhere, but I loved playing it. So I didn't want to, and I love the team, and I love being around. It was really a different experience for me going from an individual sport to a team sport. So I had only done it really for a few years, at a little bit more of a competitive level, and missed it. So I was like, well, I might as well get into coaching. Don't see a lot of female coaches out there either. So we need to have a better representation in sport, I think, at all different levels. And it is a co-ed sport, which I appreciate as well. So that's kind of where I'm at in my athletic or even just fitness, right? Trying to find activities to just keep you fit and healthy. That was always the most important thing. And then you add on the fun part of it. Brought out a competitive side of me, which is currently not being addressed.
Probably some energy in the house from that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Like beyond navigating the world of athletics, it's also, navigating fitness and making sure you're maintaining a healthy lifestyle. And, it's a big switch from having an accident like you did and having to sort of completely readjust, and also for your mental state, right? Keeping moving and in motion. So yeah, that's a really good point. Julie, I'd love to hear from you sort of what you think makes a good coach. I'm sure you've had some different coaches through all the different sports you've tried. Can you tell us some things that make an ideal coach for you?
Somebody who tells us to go out and have fun and just to be ourselves and try our best. Because we've had some really, really good coaches that have done that with us. They worked with us and they've worked on our skills with us, and they've also, when we go to a tournament, they say, okay, go out there and have fun. Just do your best. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. And that coach was, he's still a coach, I believe, in Duncan. And then our other coach, she was the same way.
Those are the important things, right? Have fun, try your best, be yourself.
Yeah, the coaches in another year, the exact same. I know my one coach, I was like, because I went to camp with his brother. So of course, he was the same way with all of us. I thought, okay, different place. I wonder how they're gonna be with us. I don't know how this is gonna go. But no, it was the same with every coach that I've ever had.
Good. Yeah, I mean, as someone that also has played on many teams in their life, you have to sort of adjust to what you have, whether that's your teammates or a coach that maybe you don't click with right away, and make the best of the situation. So I think it's important to have supportive coaches as well. Yeah. Richard, have you ever coached or thought about coaching?
Yes and no. I mean, I guess I was always a bit of a player coach whenever I played on any teams. But mainly once I retired, I was actually living over in Europe and traveling back and forth playing semi-pro in Europe and then also on the national team. And so I just traveled almost it's a lot of travel. And once I retired and got home, then I was like, all right, I need a break. And I sort of, I didn't jump into coaching or anything, but I do small things here and there. Like, I joined a basketball team here that was our junior athletes on the Canada Games level. And so I helped play on their team and also coached them too. And I guess sort of with any sport, I'm always helping out. Same thing like, with adaptive hand cycling or whether it be badminton. And again, just try to get more athletes to come up play and enjoy it and have fun. I mean, both me and Terry worked at GF Strawn in Vancouver, which is the spinal cord injury rehab center. And so we helped introduce sports and activities to everybody that was coming through, and not just sports, but even just recreation, to get out there and enjoy, whether it be kayak and camp and doing whatever you enjoy, horseback riding. So we try to introduce them to whatever sport or whatever activity makes them happy.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What sort of any organizations that you can name? We've talked about a couple here: GF Strong, SCIBC. Any sort of others that you can name that might be of use to somebody that is sort of thinking about entering the world of athletic?
Let's say Sportability. They've got, nice organization that will introduce to many different sports. BC Wheelchair Sports and BC Wheelchair Basketball. Those are a few of the mainstays, and they can definitely, as I mentioned, point in the right direction. And then, of course, with SCIBC, they do have an info line. And really, if you give them a call with any question, they can, like I said, to direct you the best way possible and put you in the right contact with the right people.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Chelsea, do Special Olympics also cater to a lot of individual sports other than team sports?
Yeah, we're about 50-50. So we offer 18 sports throughout the country. So 8 of those are winter sports, 10 of them are summer sports. And then within the winter sports, there's individual sports like skiing, speed skating, figure skating, but then there are team sports like bowling, floor hockey, stuff like that. And then in the summer, there's the basketball, soccer, softball, but then there's also, and bocce is team. And then there's also swimming, which is individual, powerlifting. So yeah, so a bit of both for sure.
Very cool. Can you talk to sort of the last couple of years and the pandemic and how Special Olympics tried to keep, its community and athleticism alive during that time? What sort of things did you guys do?
Yeah, definitely challenging. A lot of our population within Special Olympics does have technical barriers for sure. And we kind of found ourselves becoming more of like a technical world, hence this Zoom chat. So that was really, really hard to just rely on people in communities to get our athletes onto Zooms or onto social media and stuff that they wouldn't normally be onto. We do have athletes like Julie that are super technically advanced, which is amazing. So she's thrived at times like this where she can just hop on and kind of do these chats when normally she'd have to kind of wait till someone comes to Nanaimo to do something. So that's kind of a silver lining, is that people like her kind of open their world even more since the pandemic. But definitely challenging. And just when we were talking about coaches, it had me thinking about the amazing dedicated coaches that we have and that Julie was speaking about, that she's worked with, that are so great. And they're all volunteers. We're a volunteer-based organization. So every single coach that's involved is a volunteer. And prior to the pandemic, I think we were at 4,200 in the province with about 6,000 athletes. And since then it's dropped drastically, but that's not because they don't want to be involved anymore. It was just because, pandemic happened. We couldn't be in person anymore. So now we're trying to gather ourselves back up and get back up to that number and get people involved again and in person, which is something that we're not all used to, because we're used to this kind of world now. So yeah, so that's definitely a challenge, but we're working on it, and awareness is a big part of that. So we really appreciate days like today where we are able to talk about the organization and have even one more person kind of know what we're about and how they do want to get involved, kind of as Richard was speaking to different organizations that people can get involved in. That's awesome if there's somebody who does want that kind of desire to coach, or an athlete that's not involved based on their disabilities yet. So yeah, so I mean, it's been a lot of silver linings for sure, but it was definitely a hard thing to go through and a hard thing to catch up back from. So
yeah. I think on a lot of fronts for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Julie, you were unable to play some of your sports for a little while during the pandemic. How did you manage with that? What did you do to keep your spirits high and your head in a good space? Oh, I think you're muted. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
What happened?
You're good. Did you hear my question?
No.
I was wondering if you had to stop playing some of your sports during the pandemic, how did you keep that sort of, missing gap alive and your spirits up while you weren't allowed to do some of that stuff?
Taking my puppy for walks. Just try to keep fit.
Yeah.
And just keeping busy. You know, most of my time I was looking after my grandma. So that was mostly what I was doing besides looking up, making sure my puppy wasn't trying to get outside. But she wasn't supposed to.
Julie, were you part of the provincial challenge games when they were happening?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember that? Do you want to speak a little bit to what that was about instead of in-person competition?
I remember it was a while ago. I can't remember everything, but I know that I was with Amy and we did a bunch of different workouts and stuff.
Yeah, so it was kind of Special Olympics way of, we were supposed to have the provincial games obviously in person that year, which were canceled for obvious reasons. So instead we did what was called the Provincial Challenge Games, where we invited athletes from across the province to be mentored by someone like Amy, as Julie mentioned, who helped them in kind of weekly activities that we gave them a little calendar and said, today, walk 2 kilometers, this day, drink 3 liters of water and stuff like that to ensure that they're maintaining health and their kind of sport life as much as possible. And then we made it a challenge games because there's nothing better than competition within Special Olympics, because these guys are a little bit competitive, and just made it so that they got prizes and stuff like that and can kind of network on social media or however they're able to do that. But I think the mentors or the coaches, training coaches, were a big factor in that because of those barriers that a lot of them have with technology. It was good for them to be able to kind of pick up the phone and say, okay, it's Monday. Are you doing your YouTube workout or whatever link we provided to them on that day, and able to follow up with them and then tally the points, put them all together in kind of a pot for the province. And then we were able to announce kind of which regions or which locals were kind of on the leaderboard. So that was kind of our way of trying to do the best that we can kind of at the darkest time throughout the pandemic. But yeah, so that was hopefully a way that athletes like Julie maintained a little bit of fitness and activity and kept themselves busy without their programs happening.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Just supporting people through it and giving them some other options. That's really important. Yeah. And Terry, you sort of spoke to an injury that's sort of shifted your athletic journey. What kind of things in fitness are you finding now are working for you? And sort of what do you recommend for somebody that might be dealing with an injury and is no longer able to do what they were doing before?
Well, I'm still investigating. So I have a problem with my neck, which makes it really hard when that's how I balance. So every movement I make causes pain. So as long as I'm fairly well stabilized, I can do things with my arms, whether it's just like light weights, like TheraBand exercises, things that don't take up a lot of my strength or strain my neck in any way. So I'm still trying to find it out. It's not exactly the most fun thing, just doing range of motion exercises and doing weight training. I really actually always hated that stuff, but you got to keep moving, right? So yeah.
You got to keep moving. Yeah. Richard, any advice for staying fit during the off season or, during something like a pandemic when team sports aren't going on?
I'd say I probably fell along the same lines as Terry there too, that through the pandemic, my sport activity was usually sitting on the couch watching Netflix and snacking away. But online there was a lot of different programs that were run, whether it is, doing, some TheraBand workouts, some yoga, some shadow boxing. So we tried to, Terry was a big part of that too, and organizing a lot of different programs. And so there was a bit to go on. And we started, some hand cycling. That's where I tried to get out, and that was a bit more of an individual, so I can stay a bit more active. But yeah, it was never easy. Everything was a bit of a challenge through the pandemic. But yeah, hopefully things will change now, and we can get back to being active. And especially with team sports, that's a little more difficult to stay involved. But yeah, there's always different challenges, and everybody's always coming up with new ways to try to stay active.
Yeah. Did you ever deal with a major injury in your professional career that put you out?
I think as an athlete, yeah, you always deal with injuries, and actually that is probably why I did retire. My hands were very bad, in that I'd lost a lot of power with that, and mainly I think remember. So I was on the national team for basketball for close to 20 years, and in my last games when I was participating in just trying to open a water bottle to have a drink, and I couldn't open the water bottle because my hands were that weak, and so that's when I said, all right, time to retire. And it was a good long journey, and that's even tough, like I said, with badminton, that it's I can't train as hard as I know I want to, so that's where it is more, to me, a bit more recreation, that I can still play at this level but not train as hard as I wanted to, and so that's there's always many injuries that we deal with, and minor issues, but it's always trying to find the right activity, or the right level of sport that we can still get out and enjoy.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice, the right level of sport, because we got to listen to our bodies to make sure they last. Yeah. Okay, well, I would love to sort of wrap up by going through and just talking about maybe what was sort of the proudest moment in your athletic career, or it could even be, if you've been able to aid somebody in their athletic career. I would love to sort of hear about one of your high moments in your sort of athletic journey. Terry, you look like you're thinking. Do you want a minute? What about you, Julie?
Running the bases for 2017 Olympics.
Yes, and you said that was one of your high moments because you were able to run without a walker, right?
Because I had to use a walker for 2 years. I have a thing called area. It is a rare, it's very rare. It's a cyst on the spine and it builds up fluid. And it made it hard to walk for 2 years. And so what I did was Amy and I trained together for the softball skills at provincials, and I said, okay, I don't care about the medal. I just want to run the bases. And I went to provincials. I did all the things I needed to do for it. Then when it was time to run the bases, I ran.
That's awesome.
I still made it a little bit challenging to walk, but then not only did I manage to be able to run again, but I ended up winning a gold medal in the end of it.
Oh, no way. So you set a goal to run the bases and then you ended up exceeding it. That is awesome. That's a highlight for sure.
Yeah.
What about you, Richard? What's a highlight in your career? One of them for you personally?
Yeah, there's always a lot of firsts. I mean, of course, that first opening ceremonies at a big games, it's great for all the athletes to get together from all the different countries. Of course, winning your first medal, that's always a joy. But I'd say it was probably at my first games that I was able to represent Canada, but then also I was given a tracksuit by my home community of Cowichan tribes in Duncan. That's where I'm from too, Julie. But yeah, so I was awarded or given a jacket from my home community, and so it was great to be an Indigenous athlete and also represent Canada. So I wore both my Canada jersey and my tracksuit from Cowichan tribes as much as possible on my first game. So that's always been an honor for me to try to reach the highest level, because I was similar to everybody else. I just played sports because I enjoyed playing sports. I never really thought that I'd reach a national team status and the highest level possible. I do it just because I love playing sports.
Yeah, that's awesome to be able to represent your community and your home, your hometown for that. Because as much as I'm sure you do it just for the love of it, I'm sure you inspire a lot of people to reach for higher heights. So that's fantastic. Terry, have you thought of something?
Yeah, well, I'll say the obvious one, but maybe I'll tell a little bit of story behind it. Is making the finals in Athens was, a very big deal for me, especially having not competed as my other fellow athletes had been doing it for years and years, and were great mentors to me. And just the year before that, I was so much further behind them that I was like, what? I mean, even getting there to that point level was a bit of a story in itself. But but yeah, so that was kind of a big deal, having beat some of them in order to get to the finals. And then in rugby, I have to say, just like learning the strategy of the game. What I loved about rugby is and probably similar to basketball or baseball or anything like that, it's so much more strategic than going around a track, right? So that's what I loved when things started coming together for me. And I was like, oh, I'm starting to see the play ahead of when it actually happens, where the ball is going to be. And as one of the slower people on the court, you know where to go. So and then when you can just hit those hard guys and get them out of the way, the ones who are the ball carriers, it's always very exciting.
That's awesome. Totally different sort of mindset for a different game. Yeah, I did want to ask you about that in your bio when you do say within the span of 2 years, she returned to Australia to focus on full-time training, and then you competed in the 2004. So was it just like you made this decision to go for this thing and you improved very quickly?
Well, I had the opportunity to move to Australia. So I quit my job, moved to Australia, and my partner who was living there at the time, which is why I moved, was also into wheelchair athletics. So I just kept doing it. And then that's what I did. I had a little bit of a job there as well when I worked. And then I came back and did a bunch of competitions and qualified, and then you got to come, so you have to make a certain 90% of the world record, and then you have to come in the top 3 in nationals, and so I came in 3rd in nationals. But then I actually didn't make the team originally. I came in 42nd spot, and they take the top 40 athletes, and a couple of people got kicked off the team. So there you go, the rest is history. I got to go.
You never know when it's
you never know.
Yeah, you never know. That's awesome.
Always be prepared.
Yes. What is that? Luck is opportunity and preparation meeting each other. Yeah.
Exactly.
Chelsea, what about you? Do you have sort of a favorite story about a high in your athletic career, or the career of someone else?
Yeah, I mean, athletic career, it was 15 years ago now that I was competing. So I went to one international competition and a few national competitions. So that was super amazing, just having those experiences, but it was all before the age of 19. So it was just living life, being an athlete, kind of, just having fun with that. But then as far as Special Olympics goes, I'd say that very close to the pandemic, we went to Thunder Bay for the National Winter Games. So Team BC took over 100 athletes to Thunder Bay to compete in those 7 different sports. I was fortunate to go as mission staff for alpine skiing. So I managed the alpine ski team, which was such a thrill. But just the fact that we went, it was kind of my bigger competition as a staff member for the first time going, watching a lot of these athletes compete for the first time, just being in that environment was so amazing. And then going to the airport and getting on the plane and hearing the word COVID for the first time, like it was just, we just made it home. So that was just amazing. Also kind of having that high before the pandemic hit, because I think that kind of helped a lot of us get through it, and that, wow, we just did this amazing competition. We're so glad that it wasn't canceled or affected, and just kind of that getting us through the next year or two. And then now craving that competition again and wanting to get back into it is definitely why I love being a part of the organization, or one of the reasons. So super fun time doing that. And then just, looking forward into the future with the different levels of competition, and the competition cycle kind of picking up again is really exciting, to have some upcoming experiences and memories for sure. So looking forward to the next few years.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you everyone for being here. So this is going to be on our Facebook and YouTube channels. I'll make sure to share the link with you all. I'm going to sort of add any resources that are missing from already. We have a resource page on our website for accessible recreation, but some of these ones that were mentioned, I'll make sure that Special Olympics is on there as well. And just thank you so much for being a part of this. What an awesome series of different perspectives. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, all the best. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thanks,
Emily.
Nice to
Julie.
meet you. Bye.
Bye.